Welcome. It's always so unusually beautiful to be out here in the middle of the day. I'm used to looking out and just seeing darkness with these big lights in my face for the evening satsang, but it's so nice to actually be sitting here in the day and be able to look out and see everyone's face. It's beautiful. I'm so glad that you're all here at this time of the new year. It says a lot about you, because for so many people, this time is the only time off so many people get during the whole year. And so many people have schedules and jobs in such a way that just these days are the main holiday. And there's so many options all over the world of where to go, how to celebrate. But the fact that you've come to Rishikesh, that you've come to Parmarth Nikatan, that you've come to an ashram, that you've come for a spiritual retreat, it says really a lot about you. So just take a moment and allow that to sink in, because a lot of times we don't really give ourselves that credit. We see all of that which is wrong and all of the places where we're still not where we'd like to reach. But we don't necessarily give ourselves credit for actually how beautifully far we have reached. So the fact that your karmic journey, this intersection of your past karma, your free will, your intellect, your intelligence, your what we would refer to as buddhi and shuddhi, that intelligence, that purity, has really brought you here, is very, very beautiful. So let that sink in. What I was thinking we would do is I'll talk just briefly about kind of that which keeps most of us stuck, since the theme of the new year is always about newness and release, and we have to let go of that which doesn't serve us in order to be able to embrace that which does. So I'll talk briefly about that, and then we'll open it up for questions like we do in the evening. I know there were a lot of questions we didn't have time to take last night. I imagine there's even more that are blossoming and brewing this morning. So we'll then open it up for questions. What I've seen in my personal life, what I've seen in the lives of so many that I've witnessed personally, and also, of course, that which I've learned through study, both psychologically and now spiritually, is that which we want, whether we call it peace, whether we call it joy, whether we call it truth, whether we call it freedom, whether we call it enlightenment, moksha, liberation, whatever framework we use to think about. Like, I just want to be happy. I want peace. Some we think, I want enlightenment, realization. But whatever way is the goal, the truth in every case is, every single thing you need is with you in this moment. I'm going to say that again because it goes contrary to what we think. Every single thing you need is with you in this moment. If you've got an idea in your mind that there is something between you and happiness, between you and peace, between you and freedom, that is a myth, a mistake, an illusion. Doesn't mean you're bad or wrong, it just means you're human, because we all collectively make that same mistake. It's sort of part of the package deal of human life, is we think that what we need is going to come from outside. But what all of the spiritual practices do is they send us back in. What all of the good therapeutic practices do is they send us in. There's no spiritual practice, psychological practice worth its salt that's going to tell you, go out and buy this, have that, attain this, earn that, get that, and then you will have what you are looking for. It's all about going inward, because it's all there. The dilemma is that we block that for a lot of reasons, and I won't go into all of them or that would take us the full hour. But everything ranging from the way that we're raised, what we learned from our family of origin, to the culture, to the society that we're raised in, to the media, the advertising that we see, to the very nature of the way that the mind works, where it holds on to the negative. But everything you need for exactly what you want is with you in this moment. You don't need another degree, you don't need another certificate. Is that we actually hold on to it. If we went around, we won't, don't worry, but if we did, I imagine that most of you are personally insightful enough that if you really thought about it deeply and honestly, you would know what it is you are holding on to that's blocking you from your happiness, your peace, your freedom. Now, you may blame it on another person. You may say, what's blocking me is the way my husband treats me, the way my wife treats me, the way my mother, my father treats me. What's blocking me is the fact that I'm never given the opportunity to actually fully share my gifts, to become who I want to be. So you might blame it on someone else, but you would be able to see where that blockage lies. And then if you went just a little bit more honestly, just a little bit more deeply, you would be able to see how it is your way of thinking that's actually creating that. Meaning, everybody's here with their own karmic journey, their own toolkit. People are going to be nice. People are going to be rude. People are going to appreciate us. People are going to criticize us. It's the nature of nature. There are sunny days, there are rainy days. Nature of nature. But if I've decided that in order for me to feel a certain way, to attain some deep spiritual achievement or psychological state, that I need someone else to behave in a different way. It's like saying I can only be happy on sunny days. Well, you're selling yourself short because there's going to be a lot of rainy days. Or you better move somewhere where you get, 360 sunny days a year. But it's going to limit your life very, very severely and significantly. And so if you've created a mental framework that says, I can only be happy if people treat me like number one, you are significantly limiting your existence. But number two, you are creating an illusion. Because it's not true. Our nature Our core nature is happiness and peace and joy and freedom. Who we are at the core, that divinity, its nature is bliss, not just happiness, but that anand. When we say Sat Chit Anand, is existence. Truth, but not just truth like momentary truth, but that ultimate truth of existence, consciousness, bliss. That is the truth of who we are. There is no one here, no one on earth, whose core nature is anything other than Sat Chit Anand. And in it, you don't need something from someone else. You don't need something from the weather. You don't need something from the stock market. To the extent that we convince ourselves that we do, we're living in illusion, and we've boxed ourselves up. And so the key is, and the beautiful reason that the universe and Mother Ganga has brought you here, is to figure out what is it I'm holding on to so I can let go of that. My favorite story that those of you who have been coming to satsang for even a short amount of time have probably heard me share, but it bears repeating, is the story of the city in India that was overrun with monkeys. And they wanted to figure out how to free themselves of the monkeys in the city in a way that was non-violent and kind. And so what they did was they took coconuts and they hollowed out the coconuts and they put in the coconut something that monkeys like. A little banana, a piece of sweet, some fruit. And the monkeys would reach into the coconut, grab hold of their sweet, but the whole of the coconut that had been drilled in or cut in was very carefully designed. It was just big enough for an open hand to go in, but too small for a closed fist to come out. And so what the monkeys quickly realized was the moment they closed their fist over their treasure, they couldn't get their hand out of the coconut. And so they had a choice. Either stay grabbing it and stay stuck, or let it go and be free. Now, those of us who have studied evolution or even know the very basics of Darwinian science know that genetically and evolutionarily, the monkeys, the whole ape family is pretty much our closest DNA relatives. They're the most intelligent of creation on that level. We'd like to say, oh, yeah, they're smart enough. I'm sure they all let go of the treasure and took their hands out and got free. But the truth is, none of them did. And so when you've got 4 legs and one of them is stuck in a coconut, you can't climb trees, you can't swing from branches, you can't run away. And so the monkey catchers were able to catch them and take them back into the jungle. Hence this successful campaign to rid the city non-violently of the monkey menace. Now, I love the story and I tell it all the time because it's the best metaphor that I've heard for what we do in our lives. There is something that in our minds we think is that which is either going to bring us happiness, like I need this, I want this, or it is something with which we identify so fully that we can't even conceive of the fact that it's separate from us and that we could actually let it go and be free. And so like the monkeys, we live our lives stuck, metaphorically with a hand in a coconut and unable to do what we are here to do, unable to be free. And so the goal becomes figuring out what is that thing for me. For some of us, and I'll just throw some prompts out so that in your mind you can allow yourself to just see what it is that emerges. For some of us, it's a desire. Probably a desire that was put in our minds by someone other than our true self. Because true self doesn't make us stuck, it makes us free. But chances are, at some point in our life, a family member, a teacher, a mentor, an advertisement, a cultural teaching told us that we should want something. Money, fame, prestige, beauty, a certain relationship, a certain lifestyle, whatever it may be. And we've gotten our minds stuck on the idea that until I have that, until I achieve that, until I get that, I cannot be happy. And maybe it's a material, tangible thing. Maybe it's something in a relationship. Maybe it's until I have someone with whom I can have this perfect storybook relationship that I've always wanted, this fairy tale relationship that I've always wanted. Someone who sees me in this way, loves me in this way, appreciates me in this way, fills me in this way. But we've all got at least one thing that in our minds is that thing that we need to be happy. Or, the flip side, is there something in us, a grudge from an experience of the past, a resentment, shame, guilt, over a particular experience or a particular set of experiences that we have allowed to define us. And so we've allowed it to convince us that we are a victim of this or a survivor of this. However you think of it, it's still a definition. It's still an identity. It's still a box. And we allow that to define us. I am the one who has been abused, betrayed, cheated, abandoned, harmed in some way. I am the one who, fill in the blank. And that definition, that identity, keeps us stuck. Because then I can't actually move into my fullest truth. Because it would belie my identity. I know in my life, I spent the first 25 years of my life like that. I was very identified with my past, my story, my pain. And without going into the full story, again, just because it would end up taking all of our time, but when I first met Pujya Sadhviji, he looked at me and he said, "Are you going to take that to the grave?" I said, "Of course not." I was only 25. He said, "So are you going to let it go on your deathbed?" I said, No. He said, "So maybe a week before you die, maybe a month before you die?" And I said, No, Swamiji, I'm in process. I'm in process. I'm working on it. And he looked at me, and by the way, it was a good story. It was true, of course, but it was also good. I mean, I had experienced severe challenges, obstacles, trauma, abuse, abandonment, addiction, depression. I mean, a whole cluster of things that in my mind really overqualified me for having a lot of reasons for which I was stuck, for which I struggled, for which, of course, I couldn't trust, I couldn't open up, I couldn't this, I couldn't that. I said, "I'm in process, Swamiji." And he said, "You're waiting for someone to come in and draw the line for you." He said, "No one will." He said, "It's up to you. You let it go on your deathbed, in your grave, or tonight. It's up to you. And he had me go into Ganga and let it go. And I share this because for me, that which kept me stuck was not so much an idea of what I wanted, but an idea of who I am. And that formed this cage, this jail around me. For some of us, though, it's a desire. For some of us, it's a fear. But allow yourself to really think, what is that? Because whatever it is, that's what you've got to let go. Unless you are prepared to fully embrace your monkeyness and stay stuck in the coconut. And as I always say, the universe is really patient. You want to wait till next life to let it go, no problem. But eventually you're going to have to do it. And since it just leads to suffering, why not let it go now? So we're going to have beautiful opportunities tonight on the banks of Ganga, tomorrow morning on the banks of Ganga, to collectively together really let it go. But allow yourself during all of these intervening minutes and hours, really get yourself ready. What is it? What is it? Notice how it is, whatever it is, how it defines you, how it suffocates you, how it dictates how you feel, how you live, what you can do, what you can't do, how it becomes your ready-made excuse crutch. Sorry, I couldn't show up for my life in this way because I am, fill in the blank, or because I have, fill in the blank, whatever it may be. But it's what prevents you from showing up fully in your life. So enough is enough. You've made it all the way to the banks of Ganga from all over the world. Take this final step. You wouldn't be here if you weren't ready. The universe doesn't make mistakes. So if you're here, it means you're ready. So with that, I think rather than giving more of a lecture, we'll open it up for any questions that any of you have. Yeah, okay. And we've got 2 mics, so maybe rather than us losing time even for people to have to get up and walk, if you've got a question, just come and sit or stand near one of the 2 mics so that we can just take them more quickly. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But you got to speak into the mic. Oh, it's not on. Okay.
Okay. Yes?
No, not on.
No, I speak. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Hi, Sadhvi. To find happiness in myself, to live according to karma, to find the intersection between the faith and the science, to start a new year in a new way, I need to know who I am myself. You have said that the most important thing is to accept the intrinsic divinity in oneself, but you have also talked a lot about the science, which admit theses, hypotheses, studies, laws, something that the divine part does not, since it's only matter of faith. My question is, how can I know who I am if I can't find that divinity anywhere in myself?
If I can't find the divinity in myself, okay. How to have faith in who I am. We say who you are is divine. He says, but if I can't find that divinity in myself, How do I have faith that who I am is divine? Well, let's stay away from divine for just a moment. Let's work our way down from body. Okay? How old are you? 43. Great. What is your earliest childhood memory? How old were you in your earliest, like the earliest moment that you can remember being a child? How old approximately? Okay, great. So if you can go back to that 4-year-old self in your mind, at 4, you were saying, I, me, mine, right? Okay. Then at 14 and 24, you were saying, I, me. Think about yourself at 14. Think about yourself at 24. All along the way, you've been saying I, you've been saying me, you've been saying mine. Now at 43, you still say I, me, mine. Now, since you were 4 to 43, almost 40 years, your body has changed innumerable times. Every single cell of your body has sloughed off and regenerated. There isn't a cell of your body today that was there when you were 4. So if I say, show me your 4-year-old self, you cannot. If I say even show me your 34-year-old self, you cannot. There's not even a cell from your 34-year-old self that is still here. And yet, there was no time between 4 and 43 in which that sense of I got broken, right? The whole long way, as the body changed, as your self-identity and understanding changed. I mean, how you thought of yourself at 4 is probably very different from how you think about yourself now. So the mind has changed, the roles have changed, everything has changed. But there's an I that is consistent. Yeah, that's where you want to start going. Don't worry about labeling it divinity, because that gets really complex for people. A lot of us have, especially coming from different religious backgrounds, we've got a lot of hang-ups around words like God and grace and divine and what it might mean. Just think about that consistent sense of I that isn't dependent on any of the cells. It's not dependent on the role. It's not dependent on the body. It's not dependent on the mind and what it thinks of itself. It's not dependent on the actions. What is that? Yeah. Get to know that. Meditate on that. Who is that that has been there since as long as I can remember? Even as everything else has changed, who is that? Right? It's like that beautiful James Taylor song, right? Winter, spring, summer, and fall. Like throughout the year, everything else changes. But I'm here. Who's that I? That's what you want to find. Beautiful. Yes.
Sadhviji, namaskar. My question is about toxic people. Like, you can't wish them away. At times, I wish they disappear, they don't. You have to go to office, you have to go to the market.
Yeah.
So how should one deal with toxic people in this kind of environment?
Toxic people. Well, Satya, can you stand up for just, no, don't pull it off. Don't pull it off. Stand up for just a second. Exactly as you are. What does Satya have on her face? Thank you. You can sit back down. Just thanks for the demo. Now, if this were 2 years ago, we all would have had them. Why? Because there was a pandemic going along. There was a virus circulating. No one wanted to get it. You walk in someplace where there's pollution, some kind of toxic chemicals in the air, mask. Scientists work with toxic chemicals. People go places where it's, toxic and dangerous. They wear masks. Even much more serious ones than that. To protect themselves. Doesn't mean you have to stay home. Doesn't mean you can't go places. But it means if you're sensitive, protect yourself. Now, when dealing with toxic people, yeah, it's nice to just wish they all would go away. Raise your hand if that's ever worked for anybody. Just wishing that somebody would just go away. Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Because in the grace of the universe, everyone's got equal rights. The predator, the prey, the virus, the bacteria, the humans, we all have equal rights. So I've never heard of the universe just removing toxic people because they're toxic to us. Sadly. What I can share with you is 2 things. First of all, unlike a virus or a bacteria or air pollution, the toxicity in people is something that they are actually creating inside them, which means that they are suffering. When we say someone is toxic, what does that even mean, right? It's not that, they smell really bad or that they've got a disease and I'm going to get it or that they're radioactive. It means they're mean, they're rude, they're narcissistic, they're whatever it may be, but their personality is such that they create kind of a negative energetic field around them that impacts other people negatively. Well, in order to create that, they've got to be manufacturing it inside them. Which means the very first thing is have compassion. Because I promise you, however much they are exuding into the world around them is much less than that which is inside them. The majority of that toxicity is in them, a little bit is overflowing out. But if that which is overflowing out is so painful that it's hard for you to be in their presence, think about what their own life must be like. And so have compassion. When someone is rude and mean and harmful to you, it means that's what they're manufacturing inside. So have compassion. And protect yourself. During COVID time, if a family member got COVID, what did we do? Well, you didn't, kick them out on the streets or shoot them dead. You were just careful. You didn't go into their room. You wore a mask. You sanitized and washed your hands before you touched a doorknob that they touched. You put together a series of protocols that enabled you to live with them in love, in compassion, but not getting sick. And in the same way with people who are emotionally, mentally, energetically toxic, you've got to figure out a way either of staying away from them. If it's in the workplace, as you said, well, you may want to get a different job. I mean, really, you may want to think, and obviously the brain says, well, why should I? Why not them? But that isn't really a very helpful way of thinking because it doesn't actually get you very far. A better way of thinking is it worth it? And in some cases, you're going to be able to develop a technique that enables you to live with them and work with them, and that's wonderful. And in some cases, it may be so bad or it may be so many toxic people that you decide it's just not worth it. I'd rather get a different job. I'd rather work in a different environment. I'd rather transfer to a different office, whatever it may be. But it just isn't worth it. But figure out a way that doesn't bring that toxicity into your heart. So you're not thinking, I hate them, that's not fair, I hate them. Because then you've just caught their disease. Then you've taken that toxicity into you. The more you think about them. See, here you are on this beautiful spiritual retreat, but they're with you. Right? I mean, think about that. You're on the banks of Ganga and these toxic people are here with you, carried in your mind. So you need to really think, can I change my way of thinking so that I'm not impacted by them? That's ideal. You know, can I boost my spiritual immunity the way that we did with our physical immunity? You know, if a loved one got COVID, for example, in your house, in addition to taking care of yourself, what did you do? Took a lot of vitamin C, right? Got a lot of rest, drank a lot of hot fluids. You did whatever you needed to do to bolster your immunity so that you wouldn't get sick. In the same way, what do you need to do to bolster your spiritual immunity? So they may be spewing toxicity all over the place, but you're not going to catch it. So that meditation, the prayer, the japa, the seva, the ways of thinking, that would be the ideal situation. But if it's too much, don't feel badly. I mean, if you were living in a house, let's say you've got 10 members of an extended family. If 9 members of your family came down with COVID, well, it might be a good idea to check into a hotel for a week or to go stay with someone else. And that's nothing to feel badly about. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that the likelihood of getting infected has gotten so high that it's just not worth it to save the money to stay in the house and put yourself at risk, especially if you were immunocompromised. Out of 10 people, 1 person is sick, cello, you can probably manage that. So you've got to figure out, is this something I can fix with my immunity, with taking care of myself? Or do I need to remove myself from the situation? And both are really valid ways of dealing with that. But just don't bring them on your holiday anymore. Yes. Satya. And then you. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Sadhviji. Hare Krishna, everyone, and Happy New Year.
I'm not sure your mic is on. On hai unka kya? Acha.
Hello?
Yes, now you're on.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Happy New Year. My name is Pujya. I was born and brought up in Haridwar, but now I live in Australia. Since childhood, my parents, or everyone's parents or relatives, they have taught them to do the right thing. Actually, my question is why bad things happen to good people and good thing happens to bad people?
Great.
That's it.
The age-old perennial question. Why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? The dilemma is our definition of good and bad. When we say good things and bad things, it's because we've put subjective labels on things. We've said, for example, success is good, failure is bad. Wealth is good, poverty is bad. Health is good, sickness is bad. We've put these labels on things. And so if someone is successful and wealthy, we're going to say, oh, those are good things happening to that person. Somebody loses their money, loses health, loses wealth. We say, oh, those are bad things happening to that person. But the universe doesn't actually think like that. The universe has got one agenda and one agenda only. Is that you, in this lifetime ideally, wake up to the truth of who you are. That you burst through your illusions, through your ego, through the falseness, through the darkness, into the light, into truth. That is the only good thing to happen. Not having that happen is the only bad thing to happen. Therefore, the universe is giving us that which, based on a very complex and vast array of past karma, past lives, this lives, a vast array of personal aspects of our karmic journey. Based on all of that, we end up getting the situations that we get, the circumstances that we get. But they're not rewards and punishments. They're that which we need to move closer to God. And so Pujya Swamiji always says, he says, instead of asking, why me, to God, he said the statement rather to God should always be, try me. Never ask why me, but always say try me. Like, I'm here. I'm going to show up. You know what I need. You know the tools that I need. You know my weaknesses. But try me. I'm here. Because that's what it's all about. The other piece that's important to remember is that you don't really know the depth of someone's happiness or suffering. A lot of people look like they're really happy, especially those who are externally very successful or wealthy. But until you are part of their intimate family or their guru, you don't know the suffering that they have. And I've seen this now for almost 30 years. Families that you would never imagine that look from the outside like, oh my God, they must have done something really karmically right. Or people think, my God, they've done things really karmically wrong. Why are they being rewarded so much? But what you don't know is the internal suffering. So you can never judge that. But what I've learned as a very precious, personal, spiritual lesson is looking at other people and trying to judge their karmic package, their karmic journey, why they're getting something or not getting something, is an exercise in frustration and futility. It achieves nothing. It's the spiritual equivalent of taking your head and banging it against the wall. You're wasting your time, and you're harming your own mind. Because all you're doing is polluting your mind about why them, why this, why that, why da-da-da, it's not fair. Just bang your head against the wall. At least it'll start to hurt sooner and you'll stop. This type of rumination, we can do it for years on end. At least with your head into the wall in a few minutes, you'll stop. Focus instead on what is showing up in my life. Why might it be showing up? What are the lessons I'm supposed to learn from it? What are the steps I'm supposed to take through whatever it is showing up so that I can open myself more fully, so I can surrender more fully, so I can let go more fully? Focus on that. Only when you've got that completely worked out, if you still have time left over, then you can start to think about other people. Yeah, Satya.
Jai Shri Krishna. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm so excited that I'm here after 5 years. Done all the work that I needed to do to come back home. And I just want to come back to the first thing you said, which is, what Muniji told you. Are you going to take it to the grave? Are you going to take it 1 week before your grave? And you were like, no. So can I ask you to share the process in your experience through your emotional journey of how, from the time you made that decision that that's it, I'm done, to it happened? Could you share that?
Sure. Beautiful. So for me, it was a few-step process, and I'm going to go back even one step prior to where your question begins. Because some of the emotional, psychological work that I had done in advance, I think was important. So as I mentioned that in addition to having had a very extraordinarily blessed and privileged and beautiful childhood and upbringing, also had experienced severe trauma. As an adolescent, when I was a teenager, and I started really suffering addiction, suffering eating disorder, suffering depression, suffering anxiety, suffering all of that, I didn't know where it was coming from and why. The work that I did psychologically, in a very traditional psychological type of therapy work, was important to help me see, this is why. This is why I have this anger. This is why I have that. The dilemma is I got stuck in that. And I got to a point where I could have written a book about it. I was smarter in my mind, maybe I wasn't, but I thought I was smarter than any therapist I saw. I remember saying, I run circles around all these guys. Like, why do I have to keep going? It makes no sense. I understand myself so much more than any of them do. The problem was, I couldn't free myself. So I had understood the darkness fully, but I wasn't able to free myself from it. When, excuse me, when Pujya Swamiji said that to me, about you're waiting for someone else to draw the line and you can be free, that's when I realized, okay, now I will admit. So phase one was the looking at the darkness. What is it? Like, why this anger? Why this pain? Why this struggle? Go into the darkness, see it, okay. But then you're stuck in there. And then you're just sitting in the darkness telling stories about the darkness. Yes, it's dark again today. Yes, still dark. What does the darkness look like to you? Here's what it looks like to me. So step two was when Pujya Swamiji says, let it go. Now, in that, I will admit and tell you, I didn't think it was going to work. I thought, this is very sweet. Quaint, I think is the word that I used at the time. I didn't think there was a chance it was going to work. But I did it sincerely, what he had instructed me to do, simply out of respect and reverence for this enlightened master who had told me to do it. Even though in my educated, academic, scientific mind, I thought there is no way that you can actually just give your pain to a river and the river will sweep it away. But I went into it sincerely. And that sincerity was really the core of that step. Is I knew I'm ready. So I didn't think it would work, but I knew I was ready. And by God's grace, if this was going to work, wonderful. I didn't think there was a chance, but I was ready. And then step 3 was actually standing in the Ganga. And I think all that required, honestly, was really a very, very deep awareness of that metaphoric coconut that my hand was stuck in. And a readiness to be free. That suddenly my freedom was much more important to me than my identity as a survivor of that which I had survived. That my freedom was much more important to me than any of the excuses that I had given myself for why I wasn't able to live my fullest life. And I finally hit a point where, again, I still didn't think it was going to work. But I was really ready to be free. There was nothing else that the darkness was teaching me. And I had the courage, by God's grace, to say, take away the crutch, take away the rug from underneath my feet, take away every way that I am used to seeing, knowing, acting, living in the world. Take it all away, no problem. I'm ready. Now, the grace that I had was a week prior to that. When I had first come to Rishikesh, I had that extraordinary experience of divine connection, of awakening on the banks of Ganga. So I was in a position of feeling already very, very held, very one with the divine. Because if you're going to let go of your crutches, of that which you've always held on to, there needs to be faith into whatever it is that you are dropping into. If you're going to let go, the question is, what am I letting go into? Who's going to catch me? And that's where the spiritual connection is so important, is you've got to know, what can I let go into? If I'm going to let go of every way of thinking, knowing, living, identifying that I've always had, who's going to catch me when I fall? Otherwise, it's just a drop into the void. And that's a whole other level of courage. So figure that out in your mind and in your heart. A faith in God, the universe, the perfection of the universe. Faith in your truest, highest, deepest self. Faith in the Guru. It doesn't matter But you've got to have faith in something to catch you. If you're going to let go of what that crutch has always been. And for me, it was letting go of anger and of pain and of that which really defined me. And I thought, so be it. And those were the main biggest steps. The only other fourth step that is worth mentioning happened about 1.5 years later. I had already done the forgiveness. I had given it to Ganga. It was beautiful and wonderful. And about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years later, Pujya Swamiji and I were talking about something else. We were talking about children in one of our schools. And I just really casually mentioned something about, because I also had experienced this abuse when I was a kid, therefore, blah, 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 something. And he says to me, when are you going to stop talking about that? Now, if you didn't know him, you might think that was rude, that was not compassionate, that was not loving. But when you know him, not just as an amazing divine being, but as an amazing divine guru, what you realize is what he was doing was essentially removing a Band-Aid from a wound that had already healed. That had already healed. I had done that work. I was free from it. But I had kept this kind of story Band-Aid thing. Oh, yeah, that was still who I was. And he was just allowing me to stop being an actor in a drama that had long since shut down and moved on. I used to think about myself as my ego self, as sort of an out-of-work actor who used to have a really important role in a drama, but the whole play had packed up and moved on, but my ego was still kind of in full costume, standing on the corner, shouting its lines to kind of anyone who would listen, because it couldn't let go of the fact that its days as this star actor were over. And what he really enabled me to do in that moment was recognize, hey, it's over. It's over. Take off the Band-Aid, take off the costume, stop shouting those lines. It no longer is you. Curtain has dropped. And amazingly, the curtain has risen again on a whole new act, drama, scene of your life. But you're not present because you're still playing the role of this out-of-work actor shouting your old lines. Take your place on this new stage, in this new scene of your karmic journey. And so when he asked me that, my initial instinct was this sort of, oh my God, that hurt. And then I took a deep breath, as you do when it's your guru, and you realize, clearly this is in my best interest somehow. And I realized, oh, I am done with this. And I realized that the answer to his question of when are you going to stop talking about this was essentially, now, I think. Yeah, beautiful. What's our timing like? 12:47.
Namaste, Sadhviji. We were talking about karma the day before yesterday, and today also we touched the subject. My question is, what kind of karma puts the people on the top of the hierarchy? Like, let's say, if we consider Israel-Gaza conflict, or Russia or Ukraine conflict, or Afghanistan or Syria, what kind of karma put them on the top of the hierarchy, which decides and define the karma of the bottom level? And it they are the most corrupt of the people are on the top of the hierarchy. How does that, like, is it unfair? Isn't it unfair? That's my question.
Great.
Kind of.
Well, karma is not about fairness. Karma is individual, not in relation to someone else. I'm getting that which I need in order to unfold my journey, for my blossoming, for my growth, for my connection to the divine. Now, my karmic thread is absolutely interwoven with other people's karmic threads. But ultimately, it's individual. And the dilemma is that when we look at things like you're talking about, wars and human rights abuses and all kinds of horrible situations, there's so much more at play than just individual karma in that moment. If we look at, for example, the story of the Ramayana, it's a perfect example of a story in which you say, well, this is so unfair. Like you have God. Even let's say we don't necessarily even see Bhagwan Ram as God. We just see him as a perfect embodiment of a perfect person. The utmost in integrity, in honesty, in caring, in compassion, in goodness. All of that which is good, he embodied. That was his nature. He's about to get coronated as king. What does he get instead of being coronated as king? Sent into exile. Not just not coronated, but actually sent into exile in the jungle to face the demons for the next 14 years. Now, on every objective level, that is colossally unfair. That is a travesty of justice, of righteousness. There is no vision in which you could look at that and say, oh yeah, I could see how he must have earned it. But if we take several steps back and we look at the full tapestry and we go back to Shravan Kumar and we go back even further, what we see, and I won't go into all of the story now just because our time is actually up, but if we go back, what we see is a karmic story in which, long before Bhagwan Ram ever took birth, or his brothers ever, the loss of his son. That was destined the day that he killed Shravan Kumar. And Shravan Kumar's parents cursed him with that. Now, through that curse, it became the blessing that Bhagwan Ram took birth. Because prior to that, there were no children, there were no sons. They had tried, there had been no sons, no children. But because of that curse/blessing, King Dashrath gets his offspring. Bhagwan Ram appears on earth. But all of that needed to unfold, and this Shravan Kumar is only one thread in the tapestry. If you look at all of the individual karmic threads, of each of the different beings, the different characters, each of them played exactly the role that they needed to, based on those karmic threads. So when you see the full tapestry, it makes sense. Doesn't mean it hurts less. Doesn't mean it's less difficult or painful. But it means at least we can see it and understand it. Now, there's only one other piece to mention about this, which I mentioned a few days ago when we were talking about karma as well, which is, I believe that sometimes there are souls that in some way come together to offer their physical birth in a particular life in order that some change in the world should happen. So it's not, for example, that all of those who are dying in Gaza and in Israel are dying because they deserved it or that it was their karma to. But I believe that sometimes these souls, on some very highly developed conscious level, agree to allow this birth to be used in the service of waking up others. And all I can imagine and hope and pray for is that through this horror and tragedy and injustice and that which must be named and yet should never even need to be seen, that there will be a drastic and dramatic and powerful shift, ultimately, eventually, in the way that we as human beings see each other, in the way that we recognize the sacred humanity in each other. And that for God's sakes, we will stop harming, killing, polarizing the other. That we will stop even thinking of the other as an other. And all I can pray, along with the fact that the violence stops as quickly and immediately as it possibly can, is that we get a lesson from it. That for whatever universal reason those beings chose to offer this life to teach us a lesson, to show us what happens when we see the other as other, when we divide and separate and polarize. I pray that it doesn't go in vain, and that we do get that message and that teaching, and that we do finally say enough. How many children have to die before we say enough? At some point we will. The question is when. How many children does it have to be? And so that's the other aspect of this karma that for me, I believe it works like this. But it's not a karmic situation of like, oh, you get to be on top, you get to be on the bottom. It's not as simplistic as that. It's each of them is playing a role as determined by past karma, as determined by what that Jiva Atma needs in order to reach Paramatma. And in terms of whatever conscious role that Jiva Atma has agreed to bring back light to darkness. I mean, again, if we go back to the Bhagavad Gita, there was war, there was death. Like in our core scripture, look at the Mahabharata, look at the Ramayana. If you look at core scriptures, there's war, there's violence, there's death. Why? because it brings back Dharma. Ideally, we will emerge into a time where we don't need war to bring back Dharma. But I think there's a reason that when you look at all of our core scriptures, they're all centered around war. Yes, on a metaphoric level, the war is within us. But on a literal level, we've got teachings in battlefields. We've got teachings around war. Good guys, bad guys, why? Because sometimes, in order to bring about the shift that is necessary, that's what happens. And I don't necessarily believe that all of those who are dying because that was just the karmic result of their past experiences, but I do believe that sometimes when you've got this type of tragedy, that there's more of a conscious collaboration, you could think of it as, between those souls and the creation to be a conscious, active part of bringing about that shift. So we do have to end here. You've got a beautiful rest of your day of activities, and I don't want you to get too far behind. We will have satsang again this evening after the arati. We'll be in the central hall in the ashram. It's supposed to be really cold again tonight, and we noticed last night that there was a lot of kind of moisture in the air in the night, not just the coldness. So to sort of protect people from that, we'll be gathering in the central hall, what we call the satsang hall or satsang bhavan. And it's the same place where the late evening music has happened last night and the night before. So we'll gather there immediately after Arati for the satsang. Then you'll have dinner. And then we will gather back on the banks of Ganga for the evening fire ceremony. So have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day. And any questions that we didn't have a chance to take, we will take in the evening. So